third of Pakistan is underwater, obviously because there's been some flooding. And so far, I think 1,350 people have been killed. Nearly 1 million livestock animals have been killed.
Bloody hell.
1 million houses have been washed away. 40 plus reservoirs have been breached. 220 plus bridges have collapsed. 90% of their crops have been damaged. There's been a 10 billion loss to their economy, and 50 million people have been displaced because it's a country with a population of 230 million people.
Right. That all sounds awful, and I'm sad to hear that for the people of Pakistan. But, and I don't want to sound insensitive here, this does sound like something that should be worrying to us as well.
Yes.
50 million people displaced, where are they going to be going?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've already got a sizable Pakistani community in Britain, and they have, we have imported such greatest hits as grooming gangs. 1/3 of all child birth defects are Pakistani because of their tendency to marry their cousins. So they're not exactly the most useful of immigrants in our country, to put it as nicely as I possibly can.
Not doctors and firemen like.
Well,
I'm
sure there may be.
I'm sure there's a few, but certainly not in the sorts of numbers that we were sold
on.
But
if you get immigrants from a country that isn't part of the first world, you import values that aren't from the first world. I mean, that's not surprising, but of course there are set up communities there where they can just be around Pakistani people, and therefore they don't need to integrate. They can stay the same.
If any other communities tried to do anything similar, they would, of course, get shut down immediately.
Say
but,
the native British one.
But perhaps we should move back onto the subject, because
of course,
as much as we complain about this sort of stuff, it is still terrible.
Oh yes, of course. It's a massive humanitarian crisis and a tragedy, and lots of innocent people, no doubt, losing either their homes or their lives. And I feel very sorry for them, and I think that people should be doing stuff to help. So, according to the BBC, 1/3 of Pakistan has been completely submerged by historic flooding. Its climate minister said that's going to be a feature that we're going to talk about later on. Apparently, they've washed away roads, homes, crops, and it's all across Pakistan. To quote here, "It's all one big ocean. There's no dry land to pump the water out," Sherry Riemann said, calling it a crisis of unimaginable proportions, at least. 1,136 people have died. I think this is slightly old numbers now. Since the monsoon season began in June, according to officials, because of course they have their monsoon season in what would be our summer. The summer rain is the heaviest recorded in a decade and is blamed by the government on climate change. But notice that they said in a decade. That's not really that long, is it? So how can you attribute it to climate change? It's a bit silly to me. So I'm quoting here, literally 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater right now. You can tell that this woman is American, which has exceeded every boundary, every norm we've seen in the past. We've never seen anything like this. Officials estimate that more than 33 million Pakistanis, 1 in 7 people, have been affected by the historic flooding. So if anyone doesn't know where Pakistan is, for a start, here it is on
our American viewers, for instance.
I didn't want to say it. I've made that joke before on the podcast, and people had a go at me. To be fair,
well, bring on the booze.
Our American viewers are much brighter than the average American, I imagine.
That's true. All of our viewers are much brighter than average than anybody else out there.
And we're not being made to say that. I genuinely believe it as well, even if I do have a grin on my face. So yeah, there's Pakistan on the world map. It's next to Afghanistan, believe it or not, and between India, which is part of the reason why they have such historic rivalries. So let's have a look at the size of Pakistan to emphasise just how big it is relative to, say, Europe. So if you move on to the next link, John, here we have an image of Pakistan overlaid over continental Europe, and you could see that it would take up, France, Germany, Belgium and the Netherlands, with that little bit poking out.
I mean, it stretches from northern Spain all the way up to northern Poland and southern Denmark.
It might be the equivalent of the entirety of France being underwater, which, when I put it like that, sounds awfully appealing, doesn't it? I'm only joking. So yes, on a completely unrelated note to endless floods that ruin large tracts of a country, here is an article on lotuseaters.com about immigration is the reason you can't get a house. And this is, I believe, Connor and Callum talking about the housing crisis in Britain and how it was caused by immigration.
And witless Tories just constantly go on because they don't want to address the immigration issue because they don't want the Guardian to call them a bunch of racists. They instead focus on how we've still got this amazing thing called the Green Belt, and there's all these amazing countryside vistas, all these wonderful woodlands, and we should just be tearing them down and building houses on them instead. That's their
Absolutely not.
answer.
So I wanted to show a fair amount of footage about what's going on. So here we have a compilation of some various clips I found online, which John has thankfully edited together, just showing the extent of the flooding. And it basically goes out from this point as far as you can see. And obviously it's a third of the country, but then a statistic like that is very difficult to get your head around. If you're listening, by the way, all we're looking at is just this massive flat plain where the odd tree is poking out of the water. And here we're seeing pathways of people wading through water to get to safety.
You can see where the roads were, but they are completely submerged. People having to go out onto boats and what I was assuming...
push cars and ride motorbikes through it. And here we have a train. This train is the Shalimar Express travelling through the Sindh region of Pakistan, which is one of the 4 provinces. It's actually the southeastern province here. So yes, I've basically scoured online to find stuff. Yes, it's a train. It looks like it's from Spirited Away.
Yeah, it does.
Just the train driving through the water. But yes, it looks like something from some sort of dystopia. What was that 90s film with a really high budget? Was it?
You're going to have to narrow it down.
The one where the entire world is covered in water.
World?
Yes, that's it.
I mean, it's kind of a simple name to remember for the subject, isn't it? Kevin Costner's famous flop.
Yes, it's very much like that. So we can have a look at some before and afters here. If you can scroll down, John, and move the sliders on some of the images. I think it's there at the top of the images. There we go. So it's massive, and if you go through a few of those, and there's the before, and there's the after. The riverways banks have basically burst. Here's another one, which is even more severe. Yes, like the difference between that is massive, isn't it? And there's another one by CNN, which is more or less got the same thing, but that's pretty severe. And here you can see there's a river valley, and then here it is afterwards. I mean, it's looking a lot greener, but also there's a lot more water there. And here's a picture of people basically setting up on the edge of roads because they can no longer live in their houses. And obviously lots of innocent people are being harmed by this.
Yeah, imagine how awful that would be, that you just wake up one day, your entire living room is completely flooded, all of your possessions are probably ruined and destroyed, and you've got your job, you don't have one anymore, you've got nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's a truly horrible thing, and I think that it's one of those things where we should be putting our political differences aside and helping people. And although we already give foreign aid to Pakistan, I mean, people, grassroots, donating stuff is certainly good, because certainly lots of innocent children here that don't deserve it, even if you don't approve of, say, their politics or their religion. They don't choose to be born into that society, do they?
No, of course not. If people going over there directly and doing what these people seem to be doing in some of these pictures and actively just being on the ground helping out, anything can help in these situations.
So let's have another look at some more footage, shall we? This next one goes through some floodwaters in the streets, which basically looks like a horrific river, doesn't it?
Looks like rapids. I assume it's just bouncing up against something in the middle of the road there.
And this is actually one of the less bad ones, because there's some worse footage here where we'll see in a second of it collapsing entire buildings.
Christ.
Here we go, here's one.
Is that somebody on the roof? Oh no, it's just some
it's
fixture.
An aerial, I think.
Yeah,
but
the pixely video.
It's sinking like the Titanic, isn't it? It's just a massive building being swallowed up.
Well, there goes someone's home or business.
well, it's a
What are you gonna
large building as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the fact that it's swallowing up just massive tracts of the country, they're basically going to have to rebuild from scratch. Here we can see loads of rocks being carried by the stream. So anyone who gets caught in this is almost certainly dead.
Well, that's the interesting thing as well, is that this is all dirty water by the looks of it. It's full of mud. So if you get caught in it, or if you touch it and you've got maybe a cut or an injury on you or something, that's almost certainly going to be infected. And what are you going to do in Pakistan?
Yeah, well, we're going to cover that in a second, how the presence of lots of water brings about lots of waterborne diseases. So yes, this looks horrifying, and here's just the inside of a town. This is a flooded town in southern Punjab, which is obviously another region of Pakistan, and you can see that everything is flooded. You can't really get away from it because it's so flat. But don't worry, I will be looking at some nice, positive, uplifting stuff for people doing good things in a second. But no, it's truly terrible. Here it's going through the centre of a town again. It looks like there's loads of mud that's been piled up as well. So obviously when the water retreats, because the water is so muddy, lots of their towns are going to be buried. Yeah. So I think that's the end of the video there. So after I've shown some horrible stuff, let's look at people being nice. I found a compilation of 2 videos, someone saving a cat, and if you're not a cat person, someone saving a dog. So here's a guy, he's got the cat on his shoulder, going across a raging torrent. It almost...
The cat's freaked out, understandably so.
I'd be pretty freaked out as well. So yes, don't say we just give you black pills. Here are people being nice.
This is both nice and adorable.
Mm-hmm. And here is someone rescuing a dog from a hole, and...
That's good. It's good to see that people are able to... Because obviously when you see these sorts of things happening, you worry that it's just going to break out into anarchy, every man for himself style thing. But this is people showing their humanity and their sympathy, not just for each other, but also for their animals and their pets. Cause,
this guy's getting a face full of dirt to rescue this dog.
Yeah, because sometimes you expect that, when it's every man for himself, we throw aside the other virtues that we have, one of them being the kindness we have to our beloved household pets. Certainly happened in China, for instance, when they had lots of issues, say during the Cultural Revolution. So it's nice to see something happen where the cats and dogs aren't immediately be thrown under the bus. Also, here we have on Twitter someone reporting that a hotel is staying open for free to allow people to use all of their services. So I imagine they provide food and electricity, showers, stuff like that, for people who have been affected by the disaster and have lost their homes. So people are opening their doors. There's also, here's a BBC article talking about how the Disasters and Emergency Committee in Britain, which is made up of 15 charities, has launched an appeal to try and help people in Pakistan. And there are also lots of cases of people individually setting up their own fundraisers to help people out as well. And I believe I was able to find out that Turkey and the United Arab Emirates are also sending planes full of supplies, although I didn't have enough time to find out all of the countries that were donating. But I'm sure there are still good,
lots.
Though.
Yeah. So people are helping out. But of course, as you alluded to earlier, as the Independent reports, waterborne diseases are spreading among many of the flood victims in Pakistan. Apparently, Pakistani health officials on Thursday reported an outbreak of waterborne diseases in the areas hit by recent record-breaking flooding. Diarrhea, skin diseases and eye infections are spreading at relief camps set up by the government across the country. Over 90,000 diarrhea cases were reported from one of the worst hit provinces, Sindh, in the past 24 hours, according to a report released by health officials. Also, of course...
People need to remember, because people think of diarrhea and they just think,
inconvenient,
gross and inconvenient. But no, you can die from it because it can dehydrate your body to the point because it's mostly liquid.
But also remember that loads of their water reservoirs were broken, loads of dirty water everywhere. They don't really have access to clean water, which you don't really think of in a flood, do you? But it wipes out the infrastructure for that, because a lot of the pipes are obviously in the ground as well. So quite often they get dug up and disturbed when the water's that strong. But another thing that's happening is that there is going to be a massive hunger crisis in Pakistan, a country of 230 million people. So yes, obviously the crops and livestock have been washed away when the cost of crops and livestock is probably at a global peak at the minute. So apparently farmers in Pakistan's Sindh, the country's second largest province, estimated that 80% of onion, tomato and chili crops, along with 70% of rice crops that were about to be harvested, had been destroyed. So this has all the makings of a national tragedy, and very few people are actually talking about it with the seriousness that it warrants.
Yeah, absolutely, because all of these effects that we're seeing right now are just going to lead, sadly, to probably more deaths down the line.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be horrific as a humanitarian crisis, both for the people of Pakistan and for all the people that are going to have to... Yeah, relying on the resources, and all the people that are going to be taking in this massive influx of refugees, and actual refugees this time,
yes,
for once. So let's have a look at some of the reactions. Of course, India, being next door, had some floods as well. So let's have a look at the video of the Indians dealing with their very meagre flooding in comparison. Here we have a platform with a red carpet on it, which I just thought was amusing, because I'm not sure if they're taking an opportunity just to dunk on Pakistan, because they're not.
It wouldn't be the first time, would it?
They're not the best fans of one another, are they?
No.
India being a majority Hindu country and Pakistan being a majority Muslim country.
Sorry, just the red carpet's making me just think, is this just how they do things in Bollywood?
To be fair, when I went to Venice, they had platforms like that, but there wasn't even a red carpet. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, no, they didn't even roll one out just for you?
I know, I should have told them in advance, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
It was a horrible day for it as well. It's like scalding hot. But anyway, moving on. There have been, of course, some ridiculous takes from leftists.
Oh, no.
This is the obligatory section.
Oh, no.
Flooding has devastated Pakistan and Britain's imperial legacy has made it worse. Yes, it's imperialism that's made this bad.
The colonial legacy had just been floating in the ether, waiting for its time to strike.
Pakistan gained its independence from the British Empire in 1947, yet the reverberation of imperialism have endured. As a consequence, peripheral regions such as South Punjab, Balochistan and rural Sindh are resource-starved, exploited and poverty-stricken, factors that have grossly exacerbated the flood's disastrous effects. I don't think it was the British Empire that was, the one that made Pakistan poorly set up.
Poor infrastructure.
I think it was poor when we arrived and it was poor when we left. And there's only so much we could do. I mean, we built the first railway in Asia, in India, when we were there. So who knows how many millions of people that saved being able to run.
They have had 75 years between then and now to improve things.
How guilty do we have to be? I mean, we did run things quite well.
We have to be perpetually guilty, Josh. You know this.
But yes, it's going on and on about how there's some sort of large inequality in Pakistan, how their
English
rulers,
people need to flog themselves over it.
How their rulers have these nice palaces and some people live in mud huts. And of course, it's worth pointing out that things like the Taj Mahal, I'm pretty sure, were built before the colonial era. So these massive differences in wealth existed long before. I mean, obviously that's in India, by the way. But, it was all part of one country when we ruled it, the British Raj, wasn't it? So they only broke up when we left, which is also why there's border tensions and why people don't get along anymore. So that's not mentioned, is it? The potential of war. But
no, anything that would take away from Britain's culpability for this is just ignored.
So, of course, The Independent never wanted to miss an opportunity. It said, Pakistan floods, is climate change responsible? How can you know? No, probably not.
So it's China's fault then?
And as we are running out of time, it says, while many scientists would argue it's too soon to say for certain that the climate crisis is to blame for Pakistan's ordeal this summer, not without completing the necessary intricate calculations, comparing and estimating facts with theoretical modelling of a world without global heating, the signs are all there.
So before we've done any work, I'm just going to say it anyway.
Yes.
Listen, guys, I've not seen the Earth from a distance myself, but I swear it's flat. I just need to wait for the empirical evidence to come to me first.
You're a flat earther.
Oh, you know it.
So, of course, not one to miss out on being a moron, Jeremy Corbyn weighed in. The future is already present and it's distributed unevenly. Climate breakdown is causing historic floods in Pakistan and droughts in China and Europe. We need immediate support for the Pakistani people, decarbonise and funding for the front line.
I thought Jeremy Corbyn was outside of the mainstream paradigm. I thought he wasn't a filthy globalist. Whoops. Whoops, I suppose. And also, if it's causing all these problems for China, you'd think that the Chinese solution would be to obviously cut their carbon, seeing as they're the number one global contributor.
Pretty sure they release more carbon than all of Europe combined and North America. There is that. And the final thing I wanted to end on is just how out of touch British Pakistanis are with what's actually going on. I think he's Pakistani. He's at least some form of minority because he's got the brown emojis. That's how you know.
I mean, you would hope that these sorts of people would be the most sympathetic.
Just a reminder to all, it's Pakistan, not Pakistan. Please kind of takes away from the four-letter racist slur that the racists call us, and it's how Pakistanis pronounce it. Thank you. So you've just got to say Pakistan. You can't say, that's apparently not racist. But if you
apparently putting on the accent isn't racist.
But if you just say Pakistan, if you say it with the accent which I have, then I'm being racist. Do you really think that's true? No. But that's not the focus here. That's just a bit of stupidity. Obviously, we want everyone in Pakistan to recover safely. It may not be the case, but I don't think that innocent people deserve to suffer in a natural disaster, and hopefully things get on the right track soon.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this video that we did together on the politics and philosophy of They Live between me and Carl. If you want to follow what else Carl's putting out, you can follow him on Getter at Carl Benjamin on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.